hopefully you watched the online stuff that I sent, but I'm going to back up for hopefully just a moment, not long. Because this passage, 168, 69, is one of the most, seemingly at least, problematic cruxes in the poem. And by that I mean it's one of the most hotly debated passages as to what does it mean, okay? Liuza translates these two lines on page 87. He saw no need to salute the throne. He scorned the treasures. He did not know their love. Okay? And as a footnote, this is a much disputed passage. My reading follows the suggestion made by Fred C. Robinson in Wise Grindle's Not Greeting the Giefstol, Arak Mitchell, and repeated in Mitchell and Robinson's Beowulf. However, how he translates this passage is not the same translation that Mitchell and Robinson offer in their edition. Their edition, they offered this translation. By no means was he, Grindle, compelled by God to show respect for the throne. I'm trying to find his spot again. To show respect for the throne, that precious thing, nor did he feel love for it. Okay? If you consider that translation, and maybe I'll send it in an email to you, look at the number of words it takes to translate the Old English. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 words in the Old English. In Liuza's, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 words. And in Mitchell and Robinson, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24 words. Almost double the words to translate this. Now, one of the reasons for that, and that's largely required because modern English is not an inflected language like Old English was. Old English, carries tenses and things like that with word endings, okay? And it indicates parts of speech by word endings, whereas we don't nearly as much. The reason I needed to talk about this is I'm also going to talk about the lines immediately following for a couple of minutes, because I'm going to argue at least they are central to what the poem is doing. They are not extraneous, like J.R.R. Tolkien argues. Tolkien argues that the lines that come after this, okay, and these lines as well, actually he doesn't say that about these lines, he says about the lines that come after this, that they are added later by a Christian copyist, okay? So, Nohe thona yifstor gretan mosta, maadum for metoda, nehismina wisa. A lot of critics, Mitchell and Robinson, Fred Mitchell, Bruce Robinson, two of the major Beowulf critics and editors in the latter half of the 20th century. J.R. Tolkien, the major critic in the first half of the 20th century, for the most part. They all argue against what I'm going to suggest is the translation for these lines. That is, they don't see the lines as being rather self-explanatory. Right? So, I'm going to read that again. No hethona yifstor, gretan mosta, maadum fermentada, nehizmina wisa. Notice the alliteration's pretty easy to see. Gretan yifstor, even though this is pronounced with a ya, it still alliterates with the hard g, right? And then ma, me, me, okay? So, literally, not he, that gift stool, and you can translate this different ways. It can be translated as throne, as most translators do. You could translate it as gift stool or gift seat, right? You could actually even translate it, I think, it'd be kind of difficult, but the argument could be made. My brain would work. Alter. All right? To greet, it's the infinitive form of the verb. Mosta was able. All right? Mavum, it's dative plural, this ending on the end, the um. Whenever you see on the ending of an Old English word, it's telling you its case and its number. It's always dative plural. Dative translated to, for, with. Okay? So, and this goes actually kind of with that, with the treasures before God. Okay? So, but it's plural. But oftentimes you do have plurals that are used in a singular sense. Right? Like, Vader ure thuthe art in heavenum. Father our, you who are in modern English, how is the Lord's Prayer translated? Who art in heaven. The Old English accords, that is, it follows with the Greek and the Latin translations. In the heavens. Right? So, treasures or treasure before God, nor his love knew. Now, it seems to me pretty clear that he here is referring to the main referent that comes before all this, Grendel. So, not Grendel, that throne, altar, gift stool, was able to approach, put that in modern English. Where would we put that negative thing? We would add it before the verb to negate the verb. Grendel was not able to approach that throne. Okay? And then this whole phrase is serving as an appositive for that. It's restating that. Treasure before God. The throne is the treasure before God. Right? Nor his love knew. How do pronouns work with the nouns they modify usually? Or the nouns they stand in for? The pronoun refers either back to or forward to what? If it's a personal pronoun, the next personal noun. His would go back to God. Nor his, God's, love knew. What's the poet telling us? Grendel, for some reason, take this as the throne. Grendel, in the hall, can get close to it and then, force field. Hits it and gets zapped or something. He can't go to the throne. Okay? Why? Because the throne somehow is a treasure before God. What can before mean? Does before only mean location? No. It can mean purpose, or it can imply purpose. It can imply other things, right? In the eyes of God, like in front of God, so to speak. Nor his, God's, love knew. This probably is following on this part. He can't approach the throne. Why? Because he doesn't know God's love. The idea being, only those who know God's love can approach the throne. Could be, I'm not arguing that it is, could be there is a very, very loose, slippery allusion here to the book of Romans chapter 12, that all government is instituted by God. Grendel is what? Is he an emissary of government? He's the opposite, right? He would be anti-government. Grendel, if government, aka the throne, okay, if that represents order, what's Grendel represent? Yeah, Grendel's clearly chaos. I mean, just look what he does, seemingly, every night for 12 years. The implication is, when Grendel comes and raids and takes away 30 men, that's happening every night. 12 years. Tells you something about the size of Hrothgar's kingdom, which tells us something about Hrothgar's importance, about the respect for Hrothgar among the Danes. So that when we get the description about the building of Heorot and how Hrothgar, was able to command people to come from far and wide to bring tribute, he was a big deal, right? So, Grendel comes, and Grendel's destroying all this. Now, I'm going to argue there could be a reason for that. You can go back and you can look at other examples in the Old Testament of people who go into kingdoms, destroy the kingdom, and yet those individuals don't become the king themselves. Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar serves as what? He's a scourge, right? I mean, the whole story, if you begin with Genesis and go to Malachi in the Old Testament, what do we see repeatedly? The Jews follow God, and then everything goes great, and they fall. And then they repent, and they follow God, everything goes great, and then they fall. It's that up, down, feeling, repentance, turn around, again and again and again and again. You've got that kind of theme, partially, at least in here. All right? Now, look at the next couple lines. Very, very briefly, I hope. Line 170. That was deep misery to the Lord of the Danes, crushing his spirit. Many a strong man sat in secret council, considered advice. Strong man is talking about Hrothgar's counselors, right? They did what? They sat in secret council. They considered among themselves, how do we solve this problem? Right? And we're told that at times, this is what they deliberate, this is what they come up with in their secret council. They offered honor to idols. They offer honor to idols at pagan temples, praying aloud that the soul slayer might offer assistance in the country's distress. Okay? Line 176, pagan temples. The Old English word there is we wear thunga. Right? Word and banum, that him gast bona Now, Hertravum is the pagan temples. Yocha Yefremida, with Thradum, Swilchthas, Wastel Hira, Haven Rehit. Okay? Such was their custom, the hope of heathens. Havenra. You can only use the idea or the concept of heathens in relation to what? It's different than pagan. Heathens is only used in connection to non-heathens. Who are non-heathens? The quote-unquote saved. Christians. Okay? This term, Haven-ra, only makes sense within a Christian context. That's why I said it's not the same as pagans. You could talk about pagans and not be Christian. Okay? Jews can talk about pagans. Jews didn't use the word heathen. Only Christians use that term. And it was to refer to those who were non-Christian. Who could the non-Christians be? Anybody who wasn't Christian. All right? So, atheists, Buddhists, Muslims, Jews, pick your religion. All right? So, that's used in this context. What's that telling us? Such was their custom, the hope of heathens. That is the Christian narrator looking back on this past age, right? How does it begin? In Yardagum, days of old. So that's this Christian narrator saying, well, this was their custom. Why? Because they didn't know Jesus. They didn't know any better. So what did they do? They prayed to the slayer of souls, Satan. Such was their custom. They remembered hell in their minds. They did not know the maker, the judge of deeds. They did not know the Lord God. Notice all this, they did not know. It's all following on this kind of thing. In other words, they're very much like Grendel. All right? And then we get 183. Or even how to praise the heavenly protector, the wielder of glory. All right. So, 183 to 188. Woe unto him who must thrust his soul through wicked force in the fire's embrace. Expect no comfort, no way to change at all. And I should have backed up for a minute and mentioned 178b through all of 188 are the lines, particularly, that a lot of scholars think aren't original to the poem. That these are the lines that some later Christian, adds in to Jesusify it, the poem, to make it more Christianly acceptable, all right? So, woe unto him who must thrust his soul through wicked force in the fire's embrace, expect no comfort, no way to change at all. Okay? So, why must this person thrust his soul into the fire's embrace? What's the cause of that? According to these lines right here. It's because that person expects no comfort. It's because that person doesn't expect any change. Any change in what? Situation. Bingo. Whatever the situation is. So why does that result in going to hell? Because that's the fire's embrace. Not pagan Germanic idea. That's Christian idea. All right? So why does that lead to, why not expecting any kind of change, lead to going to hell? What does that not expecting any change, what does that really mean? Bingo. Being hopeless. It's too late for me. Luke Skywalker has a conversation with his father, Darth Vader, and they're on a deck overlooking what's going on, with the Empire slaughtering the rebellion and stuff. And Luke says, there is still good in you. I can sense it. And Darth Vader says, it is too late for me. Okay? Why is that so significant within that particular film? When someone can say, it's too late for me, what does that really mean? It's not too late. Why? You ever heard the phrase, where there's life? How's it finish? There's hope. As long as you're still breathing. Oh, should I give this example? I don't know if I should or not. Because I might tear up. I will. A couple of years ago, since this is still September, National Suicide Awareness Month, by the way. And I'll just throw this out. If you have any suicidal thoughts, email me, call me, I'll help. A couple of years ago, I don't know if you know who this guy is, Jordan Peterson. He's a psychologist, written a couple books, famous, all this kind of stuff. Was doing one of his book tours. And he was at a seminar. I don't think it was the Lyman. No, it wasn't the Lyman. It was in St. Louis. And he did his spiel, did his talk about empowerment, primarily young men who were in the audience. And, afterwards, he does this question and answer thing. People write questions on index cards. They get brought up to him. And he's sitting there, and he's got the mic, and he gets this question. And it's just silence. Because he doesn't say anything. He just has the question in front of him. And he's like, I don't know if I should do this one or not. And he reads it. And the person writes down, I'm thinking of killing myself. Why shouldn't I? And just like 10,000 people in the auditorium, just dead silence. And he pauses and, sits there for a couple minutes. And he says, what's the rush? What's the rush? There are probably people who love you. There are probably people who can help you. Have you? And he, throws a couple questions out there. And then he goes to the next question. And this was written about in a blog. And the person who wrote the blog was there for it. And then he has, afterwards, people who paid more, who paid extra, get to come up and talk to him afterwards. And the person writing the blog was one of those individuals. And the person who submitted the question was one of those individuals. And the person who submitted the question came up and said, I wrote the question. And Peterson, talked to him for about 5 minutes and really got him to see, okay, if you do this, obviously, it's final. There's no going back. There's no second chance on it. So, and he emphasized again, what's the rush? Have you spoken to a doctor? What you are feeling right now could be entirely caused by a chemical imbalance in your body. One little pill, and it can all go away. If you have too much of one chemical, too little of another, etc. He said, and have you spoken to somebody about it? And he just talked to him for about 5 minutes. And the person writes about it. And the individual writing the blog, writes it up. The guy who submitted the question heard about the blog entry, wrote to that individual and said, still here. I did what he suggested. I talked to some people, blah, 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 blah. When he said, I'm thinking of killing myself, why should I not? At the time that he wrote that, he was thinking, he expected no comfort, no way to change at all. And in a sense, that individual, and if I had an uncle who committed suicide, every person who commits suicide is already in the fire's embrace. Okay? They're already in hell, so to speak. That's why they do it. They don't see any light. Now look what the poet says. It shall be well for him who can seek the Lord after his death day and find security in the Father's embrace. What the people who want to take these lines out because they say they're a later added, Christian comment. Well, according to many Christian denominations today, that's not acceptable, what the poet has just said. Because look at it again. It shall be well for him who can seek the Lord after his death. Death day. Sorry, my throat's going. Or voice is going, sorry. What does he mean? Not picking on anybody's religious background or whatever. There used to be, where are we? There used to be Middle Tennessee Boulevard that way. There used to be, across the street, Middle Tennessee Boulevard, used to be a Middle Tennessee Baptist Church. Now it's the Graduate Studies and Human Resources offices. They used to have a bus, they may still have it, I no longer see it since it's no longer parked up there, that had flames on the side. And it had the words, pulling souls out of hell one at a time, written on the sides, okay? Used to bug the hell out of me. Because what does that phrase imply? What's the quote-unquote natural state of souls? to be burning in hell. All right? This says, and part of that is this idea of turn or burn. Because if you suddenly die and you haven't turned, meaning repented, you're going to burn for, all eternity and such. This speaker is suggesting not so. And there are some early church fathers, this is by no means the universal idea, but there are some early church fathers who suggest that one can find salvation after death. Think of Dream of the Rood. What happens to Christ during the 3 days in the tomb? He goes down to hell for what? The harrowing of hell. Dante gives us this beautiful image, of when Dante and Virgil go to the gates of hell. The gates are just smattered wide open, off their hinges. In other words, there's nothing holding people there other than their own will. Okay? That's kind of what this text is saying. It shall be well for him who can seek the Lord after his death day. And finds, what's that and can seek? What's that implying? Wanting change. Thinking there must be more. Thinking something must be better than this. And it's implying an openness, to acknowledge a different reality. Those who don't acknowledge any different reality other than right now. And I don't mean right now like earthly versus spiritual. I mean right now, the way things are in my life are never going to change. That right now. That's what leads to hell, the speaker is saying. This idea of looking for change, expecting change, is woven throughout the entire text. When just before Beowulf comes, we're going to be told, Hrothgar never expected a change. Beowulf comes and he's like, I told you things would get better. I told you things would change. His wife's going to say, never expected any change. Like this speech, Beowulf. Right? And you get a sudden change of characters by that. Why? Because the poet is suggesting, I think at least, to his audience, things might look bad for us right now. And this gets at the whole idea of, well, when was the poem composed? Things look bad for us right now, but tomorrow, what does Little Orphan Annie sing in the musical? The sun will come out tomorrow. In other words, it'll be a new day. You just got to, one step in front of the other kind of thing. Okay? Now, skip from there. So I just really wanted to emphasize there's this idea of change, and the phrase that is used is Edgedown. Okay? And it's not just change, it's a turn idea. Okay? So you're going this way and you turn, you divert from that direction. It's not necessarily this kind of change. We all think this word means, this interior set. It doesn't literally mean that. What's it literally mean? You're walking this direction, and if you repent, you turn and you go the other direction. It's a U-turn. Why? Because this is leading to, that's not a good example because that's a door. This is leading to a wall. Can't walk through the wall. Can walk through the door. Assuming I open it. So, Beowulf arrives. I'm kind of giving a real quick version of some other things. Pages 90 and 91. Fit 6. Those are the Roman numerals. Arabic numerals in the middle of paragraphs. Fit 6 on page 90. Hrothgar speaks after Wulfgar tells him about Beowulf coming. Right? And Hrothgar says, I knew him when he was nothing but a boy. and talks about Beowulf's father and talks about how he knew him. What did Hrothgar do for Beowulf's father many, many years ago?
He gave him like shelter and like refuge.
Gave him refuge because Beowulf's father killed a guy. Right? Killed a guy, and his people wouldn't protect him. So Hrothgar took him in. And the implication is Hrothgar took in Beowulf at the same time. That's why he says, I knew him when he was nothing but a boy. Right? Big question I'm going to have, and I think at least it's interesting, because nobody talks about it. There is no criticism written on this topic. Right? How old is Beowulf? How old is he right now in the poem? How old was he when Hrothgar knew him being but a boy? Later on, we're going to hear that Beowulf was fostered at his grandfather's, I think it was when he was 7. Okay? That is, his grandfather raised him at the age of 7. We don't know when that was. We don't know how old Beowulf is when he dies. We know that he rules for 50 years. So, absolute bare minimum, 50. But he doesn't become king when he's born. He's at least however old he is after he kills Grendel and Grendel's mother. So, say he's 20 then. He goes back home. Helac rules for a while longer. Helac dies. Helac's son rules for we don't know how long. He dies. Beowulf becomes king. And then he rules for 50 years. So at the end of the poem, a lot of people suggest, he's probably maybe about 80 or so. That's assuming he's like maybe 20 a year. What if he's not? What if he's a lot older? Because he's going to say multiple times, when I was a youth, when he responds to Unferth, he says, we were boys. Okay, so maybe that's a 20-year-old talking about, when I was 10 years old. 10 years old, jumping in the ocean, fully armed with the sword? Not going to happen. He had to be older. Had to be at least late teens. So, when I was a youth, if you're 21, you don't talk about being a youth when you were 19 or 18 or 17. That usually implies you're talking a decade, maybe, or possibly even more. But nobody addresses this idea. So, why does Hrothgar say Beowulf has come? It's on page 91, by the way, right underneath Fit 7.
Make up for past favors.
Bingo! What past favors?
Is him giving shelter to him and his
Okay, so Hrothgar is saying Beowulf is there for what reason? He owes me. I saved his father's life, and the implication is his. So he's paying back a debt. What does Beowulf say he's there for? What does Beowulf tell the Coast Guard? Hi, my name's Beowulf. I heard you have a monster problem. I'm a monster killer. So here's my card, Beowulf, monster killer. And when he gets in and he gets challenged by Unferth about the Brecca swimming contest, and he says, kind of channels Paul Harvey, says, now let me tell you the rest of the story. And he gives the rest of the story. What was the rest of the story? Well, Brecca only had to contend with the waves. I had to contend with sea monsters who took me down to the bottom of the ocean. What ocean, by the way, would they be swimming in? The Baltic Sea. Okay? Baltic Sea. North of Germany, south of Sweden, cold. Cold water. All right? In fact, he says, and when I came to land, he landed where? In the land of the Finns. That's Finland. Finland, from southern Sweden, were the Gautar, who we think were the Geats, that Beowulf is a member of the tribe. We're talking minimum 300 miles away. Spent where? In the sea, fully armed, with a mailcoat. What kind of person is Beowulf? He's not from around these parts, right? He's a Marvel superhero. He's not a normal human being. One of the ways we know that from the poem, what's Beowulf's father's name? Beowulf. His father's name is Edgedown, which means servant or slave of the sword. Pretty good name for a swordsman, you know. His father's name's Edgedown. What's the problem? Think of Hrothgar's family. What are his two sons' names? You have Hrothgar, Hrethric, and Hrothmund. Hrothgar's brothers, Harogar and Halaga, and an unnamed sister. His father, Halfdane. They all alliterate. Okay? Helak, Haribal, Halfkin, those are his two brothers. His father, Hrevel, they all alliterate. Unferth, Edgeferth is his father's name. The U and E alliterate. Doesn't alliterate. It breaks the pattern. Okay? So, Hrothgar talks about settling the feud. He says Beowulf's here to repay a debt. Beowulf says, I'm here because I'm a monster killer. So why does Hrothgar do that? Why does he say Beowulf's here to repay a debt? You know, in politics today, in the news media, there's a phrase used to describe kind of taking verbal control of a situation. What do? You set the narrative. You create the story. You tell the story that what?
Makes you look better.
You tell the story that makes you look better. You tell the story you want others to believe. You know, the spending/budget bill, currently under discussion in the House and the White House and such. The latest setting the narrative is that this will be a zero-cost bill. $5.2 trillion, and it's not going to cost $1. It's all paid for, in other words. Okay? It's trying to create the narrative. Right? Hrothgar is trying to do what with the narrative? He's trying to say, no. Beowulf's not here out of his own generosity, out of the own goodness of his heart. He's here because he owes me something. Right? So, Beowulf comes and he kills Grendel. Long and short of it is that. And he says, there's part marked. Where'd it go? Anyways, kills Grendel. Does anybody else die? Michaela's nodding her head yes. Who dies? One of Beowulf's men, right? The guy's going to be named later on. His name is Hondscio, right? Hond, hand, shoe, shoe. What's a hand shoe? What's a shoe you wear on your hand? A glove. Here's an example of Anglo-Saxon humor. Later in the poem, we're going to be told that Hondshoe was put in Grendel's glove. Grendel has a bag that he carries around. It's his man purse, that he carries around his hip, made out of dragon skin. Pretty cool. And he puts Hondshoe in that. Han puts hand glove in a glove. I know, it doesn't work for us. I think the Anglo-Saxons heard that probably after they were, 3 sheets to the wind and they were rolling on the floor laughing. Who does Beowulf attribute his victory to? Yeah, notice he doesn't go, I did it. He channels Frank Sinatra my way. He doesn't say that. He says God determined the victory, and in fact, even before he fights Grendel, he says, it's up to God. May not be me, may be Grendel. If all that's left of me are bits and pieces, send it back to Helak. And he specifically mentions the mail coat, that was woven by Wayland the Smith and stuff. Page 97. Hold on a second. I'll go back for just a minute. Yeah, page 97. People come back to the hall after the fight, and they follow Grendel's track off to his mere and such. They ride back, and we're told around lines 898 and following, the narrator compares Beowulf, to a variety of people, including 884, including Sigemund. Who is Sigemund? He's a famous Germanic dragon killer. If we know of Sigemund today, we know him by another name, Siegfried. He's who Wagner wrote about in the Ring of the Nibelungs, the Ring of the Nibelungs cycle. Sigemund was a famous dragon killer. In fact, we're going to be told in this passage, Sigemund killed the dragon, stabbed him with the sword, and the sword stuck in the wall. This is going to be, I think, at least significant. Because Beowulf is going to find a sword in/on a wall later. Nobody has written about this. Years and years ago, I was going to write a book on Beowulf, and I never got around to it. I did all the research. I've got a stack of, I literally got a file cabinet in my office, that if I were to pull all the articles up and stack them up, they'd be this tall. Read every single one. Nobody has written about this. I think the sword that Beowulf uses is Sigemund's sword. But something's going to happen to that sword. So, they come back after singing Beowulf's praise, and Hrothgar goes into the hall, line 14. And he says, line 928, for this sight let us swiftly offer thanks to the Almighty. Much have I endured, dire grief from Grendel, but God may always work, shepherd of glory, wonder upon wonder. Notice, God is always able to perform miracles. It was not long ago that I did not expect ever in my life to experience relief from any of my woes. Why? Every day for Hrothgar was like what? You guys are all too young to remember. 9/11. It was like 4 planes crashing into buildings in the United States. Every day. For how long? The last 12 years. Because every day, what did Hrothgar have to do at Harald? In the morning, clean it. What about in the afternoon? He had to leave. he had to leave because he knew as that sun went down, Grendel's coming. And he knew he couldn't withstand Grendel. All right? So he goes on and talks about Beowulf. Now a retainer is done, line 939. The very deed through the might of God, because we've been told God has given him the strength of 30 men in each hand grip. Okay? What we all could not contrive to do with all our cleverness. That's, sitting apart in secret council. Lo, that woman could say, whoever has borne such a son into the race of men, if she still lives, that the God of old was good to her in childbearing. And some Beowulf scholars, and I'm definitely one of them, think this is a very loose allusion, like to the description of Mary being blessed among women. Why? Because of the fruit of her womb. Your mother, Beowulf, was blessed because of you. So he said, I will cherish you like a son in my heart. And this is going to create a problem later on. Because the word is going to reach Wealhtheow that Hrothgar has adopted Beowulf. Notice, he says, I will cherish you like a son in my heart. He doesn't say, I'm going to make you a son. Okay? But the way Wealhtheow either interprets it or it's told to her is that he's adopting him, which does what to his other two natural-born sons? Kind of pushes them aside because Beowulf's older. Okay? So, Beowulf says, freely and gladly have we fought this fight, done this deed of courage. Notice, we. How much fight did his men do? None. They tried, but they were of no use. And notice what else, how he begins that. Freely. What does that imply?
He wasn't just paying back.
Yeah. This wasn't for paying any debt. I didn't owe you squat. Okay? I came here on my own, of my own good will and such. And he goes on and says, I really wanted Grendel to be here for you to see him dead, but, that's not what God intended. God had other ideas in mind. And notice what else he says. Grendel went off for what? Whatever judgment God gives him. Beowulf does not consign Grendel to hell. Interestingly, when Osama bin Laden died, was killed, a very famous preacher, he wasn't known as much as a preacher as he was as a failed presidential contender by the name of Mike Huckabee, former governor of Arkansas, who's also a Baptist minister, said, may he rot in hell. Okay? Immediately passing judgment, kind of an idea. Beowulf doesn't do that. He just says he's gone into the judgment of God. Okay? So, we're told 980 and following, the son of Edgeloff, sorry, not Edgeferth, I said, Edgeloff, which means the leavings of the sword, the leavings of the edge. What does that mean? Well, if you sharpen a sword, you're going to have little metal filings. That's what the poet is saying Unferth's father is. He's not the sword edge. He's what's left after you sharpen the edge. As opposed to Beowulf's father, who is servant, slave of the sword. Right? We're told Unferth is silent. Because what has Beowulf now proven? Yeah, I am a monster killer, and Unferth, you're a lot of hot air. Okay? So they clean up Heorot, and what happens? What do they sing about? A poet comes in, a sharp comes in, and sings a song, sings a lay. It's a heroic poem. Okay? Well, what's it about? It's collectively kind of called The Fight at Finnsburg. Okay? And it's about a woman whose husband, about a woman named Hildebert, who's of Danish origin. She marries a guy named Finn, who's a Frisian. She goes and lives with him. They have a son. Her brother, Knaf, comes and visits with his, troop, army, and such. And Knaf and Finn get in an argument. There's a battle. Knaf gets killed. Her son gets killed. They are burned together on the same funeral pyre, and it's kind of implied they kill each other. Why is this important? Because of the relationship. The closest bond in Germanic warrior society is man to sister's son. Okay? So man to nephew. But it's sister's son, not brother's son. For some, we have no idea why. Absolutely, but it seems to be clear from all the literature. So he seemingly kills the person he ought to be closest to. All right? So what happens? They swear a truce. Later on, spring comes, the truce wears thin, all hell breaks loose again, and all the Frisians are killed at this particular location. And Hildebert is carried back off to the land of the Danes. And this is meant to be a celebratory song after Beowulf kills Grendel. Why? What's at the center of that poem? What idea? One word, really. Feud. What is a feud? It's when you got a problem with somebody, and then that problem continues to your descendants and that other person's descendants, and to their descendants. How do you stop a feud? The only real way you stop it is by one side annihilating the other. What famous feud does the poem kind of open with? And I don't mean open, like the first few lines. Where does Grendel come from? Cain. What feud does Cain begin? He kills Abel. He opens a feud not between himself and Abel's children, because Abel doesn't have any children at that point. He opens a feud between himself and God, we're told. In fact, we're told that when Grendel comes, he bore the ire of God. He bore God's anger. And the verb to bear there can be pretty interesting, because it means he can be carrying it like on his shoulders, like God's, zapping him. But to bear can also mean what? Here's God's anger. Here's God's bringing it to. See, it could be that Grendel, in that sense, is like an angel of death. He is bringing God's anger to the Danes, which is kind of interesting, because if he is, then you got to step back a moment and say, why is God angry at him? Okay. Well, Hrothgar is going to answer that question, possibly, when he gives us what's called his homily, which is going to be in a few hundred lines after Beowulf takes care of Grendel's mother. And we'll pick up there. We'll pick up probably around F21 on Wednesday.